Ask everyone here, do we see a new form of global capitalism coming about, or is it just business as usual? Ivan, in Washington?
Well, I think everyone's thinks that this was caused by under-regulation, so we're going to see more regulation. But in my view, it was caused by the government, telling the banks, and this is nothing new here. Since the 1930s and even before that, actually since the beginning of the U.S. Republic, banks have had a preferential place, and many of them are regarded as too big to fail. And when you put a crutch under like that, under institutions like that, they'll make risky decisions, and so the same thing will happen again in the future, I think. So nobody seems to learn their lesson. They just over-regulate. I think the market is the best place to create prosperity, and if institutions are making bad decisions, they need to be held accountable, and they need to go out of business.
Let's listen to Congressman Ron Paul, what he has to say about what kind of society we should be building.
We have to decide in this country one way or the other. We either have to decide that freedom works, the market works, sound money works, our Constitution is worthwhile, or we march on to some socialistic, dictatorial, authoritarian government.
Alistair, what do you think of those words?
I mean, basically, what Ron Paul was obviously meaning when he meant, do you think freedom in a free market economy works? He wasn't trying to say that what we had in recent years was a free market economy, because obviously it wasn't, because of all the huge government subsidies and intervention and the central banks, and also the guarantees, the implicit guarantees. I think that is the point. You have to have a free market in finance, a real free market in finance. If you don't have that, if you have a pseudo market, all the kinds of problems we've had in the past few years, you will have all these kinds of crises. The problem we've had a massive failure of the old order, but the old order wasn't necessarily a free market economy. So that's what we need to remember when we change all the regulations and the rules and so on.
Okay, Alistair, you said the new order. Ben, what is the new order? Or is it still the same?
No, things have definitely changed. I mean, this crisis for me came around as a result of, in the last couple of decades, trade globalized and then finance globalized. It's part of the reason why China's got so much money now, is because it became the factory of the world. But at the same time, financial regulation hasn't globalized. It's very much a national thing, and part of this crisis has been caused by this fragmentation. And you saw at the IMF meeting recently, the IMF want to step into that role and become like a regulator for the world, and that was very much what came out of the Pittsburgh G20.
Is that a good idea or a bad idea? A lot of people have a lot of hesitation about the IMF. Tom?
Well, I think this issue of global regulation is a very difficult thing to enforce. I don't think you can say universally there should be a cap on salaries for bankers across the world, because clearly that's not going to happen. People are going to get around that, and other countries will be put at a disadvantage. But there are clearly ways in which countries can cooperate more in terms of the way trade is conducted. There's an imbalance clearly between China and Russia.
I mean, in the midst of the crisis, I mean, one of the reasons why we prevented the 1930s Great Depression was that the major central banks all acted together. And that stood up everyone's confidence, and that sort of put the brakes on